Hi.
Hi, Miss Victoria.
Hello.
What are you doing?
Very well, thank you. And you?
I'm good as well. Thanks for joining. It's
Pleasure.
just we still have got 6 minutes, so
Yeah.
people are joining up. So we shall stay put, and we shall get back at 1 p.m. and then I will introduce things to everyone for like short while, and then it will be all yours.
Fantastic. That's great. Super. I'll be here. I'll just switch my video and my microphone off.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope all of you are doing well. I'm quite sure that you are listening also very well. First of all, I would like to thank you all for joining this monthly training session. And I'm very pleased to have Miss Victoria Bagnall from the UK with us. And I am also very pleased to share that today exactly marks 1 year of these monthly trainings, which are offered free of cost to almost 90% of the audience. And each month we have tried to have some very good speakers with us who have shared their knowledge and insights. And I'm quite sure that today's session will be equally useful to everyone who is participating. So as a norm, as a set SOP of starting, I will just take like 30 seconds to recite few verses from Holy Quran. Please take أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألم نشرح لك صدرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا ومع العسر يسرا إذا فرغت فانصب. Sorry, I messed it up. So let me try again. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. So once again, thank you everyone. This session is going to be bilingual since Mrs. Victoria is from UK, she will be talking English. I will try my best to jump in and translate wherever it is necessary. And all of you will have equal chances to ask questions as well. So as in the previous sessions, we take like 5 minutes to introduce ourselves. I'm sure most of you already know that we are doing these monthly trainings from School Mentor platform, and School Mentor, just let me share my screen. It will take School Mentor is sure screen is School Mentor is working since 2019, and this slide is this presentation is not that much updated. We have now got like 700 plus schools who have worked with us and were founded in 2019. Basically, we have 5 core modules, which are manuals for school operations. We provide AI-powered School Mentor, web ERP, and web applications as well. And the session you are currently attending is a part of monthly training and workshop for staff. Additionally, we are in the final days of launching Mentor AI, which will be a dedicated AI tool available to all our customer members as well, and also available on Play Store. So basically, we have served a lot of schools, and what we offer a range of services in academics, administration, accounts, UX, SOP. So if I want to summarize it in one sentence, it is all the academic and administrative requirements of schools, they are catered by us in the form of digital support, in the form of manual support, and in the form of trainings as well. In academics, we have got different tools to support academic management of the school. For example, one feature is homework diary, where teachers can use the mobile app to assign the homework to kids, and this is not just simple assignment of the homework, but everything is tracked. Once the homework is delivered, it stays in the mobile app forever. So whenever teachers, parents, or principals, they need to track, they can go back and select the desired date, and they will have their homework. So teachers, they can write text, they can attach files, and they can attach videos as well with this homework. And similarly, there are lots and lots of features. One key feature is question paper generator, which can be used to generate question papers in a matter of seconds. So the idea behind is whatever is being taught inside the classes, it gets saved into the portal by the teachers, and then at the end of the term, they can specify which question types they want to have, how many question numbers they want to have, and by just making few selections, they can generate the question. And we have academic manuals and HR manuals as well. So basically, these manuals are policy documents. For example, how a school should have their homework policy or their timetable design or their curriculum planning. So everything is presented in these modules or manuals in accordance with international research, and then it is up to schools to go through these manuals and come up with their policy as well. So in administration, we have got building mobile apps, students management, meetings management, task management, notice boarding. I'm sure you will keep on exploring it. So most recently, we have also launched School Mentor CPD. I'm not sure if you are able to see that screen. Okay. Yes, so we have started this initiative named as School Mentor CPT, where we aim that grow your teacher, grow your school. So these are dedicated 3-month training courses which are aimed at improving teachers, not just for them to be working perfectly well inside the classroom, but also we provide them with opportunities to apply to abroad and sharpen their professional careers. These are not the ordinary trainings, but they are backed by real experience and real progress tracking as well. We do not believe that trainings are a one-off events where a trainer speaks and that's the end of story. But we believe that training is a continuous process which requires to be implemented after the training has reached. So you are more than welcome to explore this as well. Our supporters will also be important. So I won't take further time of yours, and I can stop my screen sharing right from here, and I will invite Miss Victoria. Please turn off her video and start talking. Yes, Miss Victoria.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm here. That's great. Super. So before we get started, I just did want to just make sure that everyone has got the link to the presentation. So into the in-call messages or the chat, I've just popped a link there, which means that everyone could access the presentation on their devices. And I'm also going to be calling on the audience members to contribute today as well. So let's get started.
So just let me confirm from the participants. उम्मीद है आप लोग खैरियत से होंगे. अभी मैसेजेस के अंदर एक लिंक शेयर किया है मिसेस विक्टोरिया ने. Sorry, I'm speaking in Urdu. I'm trying to confirm from participants that they have received the presentation. So we are getting the positive responses. Like someone has just confirmed that they have got the presentation.
Fabulous. There'll be other ways to access it as well when we get onto the presentation. So that's super. Great. Okay, so we're looking today at teaching students how they learn. So looking at the mechanics of learning, specifically executive function skills for self-regulated learning. So you can click on the link in the chat if you can access that, but if not, you can also scan this QR code on your screen using a smartphone, or you can go to an internet browser and type in the URL www.menti.com, and that will take you to a page where you can type in the code on the screen. That's 6890 4029. So that's that code on the screen. I can see we've got 4 people who've managed to do that, but I know there are many more of us online. So I do hope that you're being able to access it okay.
Guys, please इस वेबसाइट पे जाएं menti.com पे और एक बॉक्स ओपन हो जाएगा फॉर कोड, और वहाँ पर आपने ये कोड एंटर करना है 68904029. तो आपको एक्सेस मिल जाएगी इसकी एंट्री मीटर की और वहाँ से आप फिर फर्दर कम्युनिकेट कर सकते हैं. So could you please tell how many people have managed to do that?
We can see it at the bottom corner here. 4 it seems to be that have managed. So I think we're getting a bit stuck somehow, but let me just double check. Yeah, only 4 people. I know there's lots more people than that online. So if people are having issues, maybe they can post in the chat and we can assist. Let's just see. Okay. The code, yeah. So the code is on the top of the screen here. It's on the shared screen. So that should be working. A few more people have managed to do it.
So it says you are all set waiting for presenter when I enter it.
Yes, that should be it. That's we're just waiting to move forward when we've got a few more people. Yeah, I can see some people
Yes.
managing. We can switch off our microphones when we join. That would be great. That's it. Super. Thank you. Okay, so you should just be able to click on that link in the chat and that should take you straight through. But if not, the instructions to join are at the top of all of the interactive slides, and I will be requiring input from the audience. So I do hope that we can get a few more people online than we've got currently. I can see the numbers are climbing. That's great. Super. Lovely. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You will have been sent a handout already, and that's got all the key information from today. And also we'll be sending out a PDF of all the slides that you're viewing today. So please know that they're coming. We're going to have a Q&A, a question and answer session at the end of today. So if you've got any questions that come up for you, then make a note of them, and I'll be very happy to answer them at the end of the session. Super. So the objectives for today, what we're going to be learning, we're going to be understanding natural diversity in brain development, looking at executive function and the link with neurodiversity. We're also going to be understanding that executive function development is linked to well-being, connection, and safety. And finally, that executive function skills can be intentionally developed, so we can work on developing these important skills. So let's just practice with our Mentimeter now. I'd love to have the audience please describe the children you support in your roles in schools in 3 words. So just choosing 3 different adjectives to describe the diverse children that you support. And that's going to create a lovely word cloud for us on the screen.
Sorry, my mic was off. अच्छा, मिसेस विक्टोरिया ये चाह रही हैं कि आप प्लीज डिस्क्राइब करें 3 वर्ड्स में कि आप चिल्ड्रन को किस तरह सपोर्ट करते हैं अपने स्कूल के अंदर. तो जस्ट से एनी 3 वर्ड्स, कोई से 3 अल्फाज बताएं जो कि आप जो डिस्क्राइब करते हो कि जिस तरह आप बच्चों को सपोर्ट करते हैं एक्टिविटीज.
Hello, Marjan Khattak here from American Lycetive. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, you are audible, miss, but we have got questions and answers reserved at the end of the session. If you want something, you can.
Actually, there is a request as well as all of our staff members. Their understanding level is not accordingly that they can, like the voice level and the speed level is too fast. So that's why the staff, they couldn't understand what you are trying to saying. So I guess it's a humble request. If the presentation slowly and gradually we can, then easily we can understand and easily and everyone can participate. This is my humble request. And the second thing, the question which you asked, so first we observe the students and definitely according to their level, thus we support the students.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
That's super. Thank you very much. I will try and slow down my speaking and keep things really simple so that everyone can understand. So, we have lots of lovely adjectives here to describe the children that we work with. Brave, energetic, excellent, good, curious, joyful, emotional. Of course they are. They're human children, so they will be emotional. But wonderful to see all these really positive words to describe the young people that you will work with. And lovely to see that curious coming out as the most important one. So just starting off with a little introduction to me. My name's Victoria Bagnall and I am a teacher. I'm also neurodivergent, means I have a diagnosis of dyslexia. But despite that, I did manage to get to the University of Cambridge to read geography. So I'm a qualified secondary geography teacher. I'm also a mother of 3 daughters. I'm one of the co-founders of Connections in Mind and another organisation called The Code, which offers tuition, as well as a trustee for a charity called the Learning Skills Trust and an advisor for the Divergent Schools Group based here in the UK. I also co-founded International Executive Function Coaching Certification, which is a regulatory body for executive function coaching. And I've written a book called The Neuro-Inclusive Educator, which is published in August, and talks about everything we're going to be looking at today. So I always start off these talks by talking about my story and my journey, because I know that humans learn through stories. So I want to share my story. And at Connections in Mind, we talk about the moment when we learn about executive function as a moment where a light bulb goes on for us and we can see the world in a different way. We call it our light bulb moment. So my light bulb moment happened when I was supporting a student who was very good academically, but found organising themselves in their learning very, very hard. And I think we've all worked with students like that, and maybe we know some people personally like that. As I was supporting her to take her A-levels, but she was actually in hospital for her mental health. She was really struggling with that, but she did very, very well in her A-levels. And it was very confusing for me as a teacher to try and understand how someone so intelligent could find basic organisation really difficult. And it wasn't that she wasn't trying, she just really couldn't do it. She didn't have the capacity or the skills to do it. So I was recommended at that time to read this book, which I recommend onto you. It's called Smart But Scattered Teens. There's one for younger children as well as one for adults. And it's all about executive function and strategies that we can use with young people. So I read this book and I had my light bulb moment. I was like, wow, this is life-changing learning in this book. And I want everyone in the world to understand more about this. So this lady here is one of the authors of the book. There isn't a PDF of the book available, I'm afraid, but it's very affordable and able to buy on Kindle and ebooks. And so this lady here is Peg Dawson. She is one of the authors, and she and I have set up the International Executive Function Coaching Certification together. So it's part of our work. If I could just ask everyone to make sure that they're muted, that would be super. Thank you. Lovely. So at Connections in Mind, which is the organisation that I founded 11 years ago, we have a mission to educate people about executive functions and to change the world. So I'm so glad and grateful to be here today, speaking to you across the globe, which I do regularly to all corners of the globe, about a subject that I'm very, very passionate about, because this work has wide-reaching human implications. So Connections in Mind is our organisation, and we offer these services. We offer executive function coach training, so you can learn to become an executive function coach and to help students with their organisation. We also run neurodiversity training and talks like the one I'm doing right now. And we also have our own private practice in coaching and admin support too. We work with organisations like the NHS, Ernst & Young, Citigroup, Cheltenham Ladies College, and many of the city councils and local councils around the UK. So we're well known both nationally and globally. So we're going to start off with our first module of learning on neurodiversity now. So neurodiversity is a very interesting term, and I would like you on the Mentimeter to have a think about these terms. Now, they're English terms, and I don't know if there's an equivalent in Urdu that might be able to be translated. But we've got neurodiversity, neurotypical, and neurodivergent. So I'd love to know in the audience, how confident do you feel first defining and then using these terms? So do you feel very confident, or have you never used them before?
So just यहाँ पर आइडिया ये है कि आपने ये टर्म यूज किया, आप उनके बारे में जानते हैं या नहीं जानते हैं, इस बारे में आप मेंटीमीटर पे जाके कमेंट कर सकते हैं. अगर आप बहुत अच्छी तरह इन टर्म्स को यूज करते रहे हैं तो 3 आंसर होगा, और अगर आपने कभी नहीं यूज की तो 0 आंसर. तो प्लीज गो टू योर मेंटीमीटर, आपको नजर आ जाएगा वहाँ.
Fantastic. So I can see here on this graph, we've had a few people fill it out, and it's very common that people feel a little bit confident in these terms, but not very confident. And that's when I do the training in America, in the UK, in Singapore, all around the world. It's very similar profiles that we see of understanding of these terms. So I just want to clarify them before we move on. So I always start by thinking about the history of where we are today. So where we are today is that we have a whole list of ways that human brains can be disordered or have deficits. And that comes from a historical understanding or assumption by scientists and doctors that brains functioned like other organs, that they either functioned normally or they functioned abnormally and needed to be corrected so they could function more normally. So that was the assumption that we had, this idea of this normal brain, and there's all these different abnormal brains. So we could have autism spectrum disorder, we could have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, all these different ways that they thought the brain was abnormal and needed to be fixed and made more normal. But actually, in the last 20 to 30 years, we've had the technology to be able to study the human brain and understand much more about it. And now we know, as a biological fact, that there are 100 billion neurons in every human brain. 100 billion, around about that number. It differs with different people. But there's lots and lots of neurons. And each of those neurons has 1,000 connections, or around 1,000 connections with other neurons, which means that there are literally trillions of different ways that a human brain can be wired. So many different ways that a human brain can be wired. We also know, as a biological fact, that everything we experience from the moment we are conceived all the way through to the day that we die impacts our brain and how it develops. So our brain is very, what we call, malleable. It changes according to what happens to us in our lives. So from that, we can understand that the only thing that we can be certain about in brain development is diversity, that there is no such thing as normal brain development, and therefore there's no such thing as abnormal development. There's just unique human development, and every single human on this planet is unique in their brain development. We can just make sure we've got our microphones off. That would be super. Thank you. Lovely. So, neurodiversity is the biological fact that all brains are different. They just are. They're different. And neurotypical are the brains that are closest to the average, okay, in the distribution of different types of brains. But even within that idea of neurotypical, there's lots of diversity. No two people will ever think and behave in the same way. There's also just as many people whose brains are wired so differently that they find it difficult to conform with what society expects of them. So they find it difficult to concentrate in school. They find it difficult to organize their belongings. They find it difficult to socialize. Because there's all these expectations we have within society of what a normal human should do. But actually, those humans are as they should be. That's as they have, as the universe intended them to be. And actually, it's our society that has this view of normal versus abnormal, which needs to be unpicked. So in summary, for this module, we only have one certainty in our understanding of brain development. One thing that we are absolutely sure of is that every single human brain is different. Diversity, okay? Diversity is the key. But diversity is also of great benefit to us all as humans, because having people that think different ways has meant that we have, as a species, been able to do incredible things with our incredible brains. And the best teachers help children to understand how their individual brains learns so that they can flourish. So it's all about working out how that individual learns, and it will be different from the child sitting next to them. They don't all learn in the same way. So now looking at executive function. So this is my specialist subject. I have spent the last 11 years reading everything that has been published on executive function. So I know quite a lot about it. And I want to talk to you more about this area now. So first of all, I just want to point out that in the last 6 months, the British government has recognised that executive function is one of the 5 core areas of child development. So it's being recognised on that governmental scale now in England. And that's really important, I think, because historically, what happens in England has had far-reaching effects around the globe. So it's really important to recognise that that is being understood and recognised at a governmental national level in England. So executive function challenges, so difficulties with our executive function, are associated with all of these different diagnoses. So we've got ADHD, autism, Tourette's, depression, anxiety, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dyslexia, and many, many, many more. Okay, so this term is what we call transdiagnostic. It goes across all of the different diagnoses, and if you have training in executive function, then you can work with children and adults with all of these different diagnoses. So it goes across all of them. So I would like you to, again, let me know, what's your previous knowledge of executive functions? Have you ever heard of them before? Or are you an expert? You can go on to menti.com. You can use the QR code scanner on the screen if you like on a smartphone to access this. But it would be lovely to get some responses from different people. Super. Very interesting. A few people have not heard of them before, and a few more people have got quite a lot of knowledge. So that's a lovely spread. Please do forgive me as I go slowly through this topic for those of you who are more on the expert end of the scale, because it's really important for me that everyone here gets to learn about the basics of executive function. So, executive functions are the cognitive processes, which means what the brain is doing in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So that's the bit of our brain behind our forehead. And they're called executive functions because they help us to execute tasks, to get things done. So it's all about executing things and getting things done, and that's why they're called executive functions. So there are 3 core brain functions that are executive function. We have working memory. So working memory is our brain's ability to hold information in its short-term memory and to use that information to do complex tasks. Then we've got inhibitory control. Inhibitory control is our brain's ability to stop ourselves from doing things we instinctively want to do, like getting distracted or speaking out of turn in a lesson or swearing or causing a disturbance. This is our inhibitory control. Then we have our cognitive flexibility. That's our brain flexibility. And that's our ability to change our thinking from one way of thinking to a different way of thinking, and not just to be fixed on one path. So those 3 areas are what the prefrontal cortex is doing. But we can't have scanners to see how children's prefrontal cortexes are developing. Instead, in schools, what we're very good at is developing skills. So all of these on here are executive function skills that we can, as teachers and as schools, develop these skills. So we have goal-directed persistence. So that's keeping going towards a goal no matter what happens. We've got emotional regulation. So that's our ability to recognize our emotional responses and to calm ourselves down so that we can have a different emotional response to something. Then we have planning and prioritization. So we plan our time, we prioritize which piece of work to do first. All of these different executive function skills. And in your handout, you'll find that you have all of the definitions of all 11 executive function skills written out for you. So everyone has executive function strengths and challenges, and everyone can benefit from working on them. So what does this mean? Executive function impacts our ability to meet deadlines, to prioritize our work, to regulate our emotions, to inhibit our responses, to organize our belongings and keep things tidy, to organize our thoughts on paper, to hold information in our heads, to keep time and be punctual, and finally, to think flexibly. So I would like you now to think about which of these things do your students find hard? Which of these are difficult for your students? You can select as many as you like. But it would be good to know which of these do your students find hard. Very interesting. So we can see from this graph that there's a very even spread of challenges in young people with executive functions. They don't all struggle with the same things. And that's because every human has different skills, strengths, and challenges, just the same as everyone has different skills in their mathematics ability, or their ability to play cricket, or their ability to do all sorts of different things. They have different abilities in their executive function skills as well. Interesting that we've got regulating emotions coming up very high. Absolutely. We are humans, and you're working with human children, and they really struggle to regulate their emotions. That's a natural, normal part of their development. But we can and should work on helping them to develop the skills to regulate their emotions. And that can help children who might have ended up being in disciplinaries to actually develop the skills to stay out of disciplinaries because they're able to regulate their emotions. So it's very important that we recognize that all of these are skills that can be developed and should be developed by teachers. So often we make judgments about children, and I want us to help us to reframe those judgments in terms of executive function skills that are still developing, that need support in developing. So often we call children lazy, but often that's because they're struggling to start the tasks so that they can get things done. They haven't got that skill of being able to start tasks. It's a really complicated skill, actually, to be able to start a task independently. So they're not lazy, they just haven't developed their task initiation yet. The next one is disorganized. So often we can say a child is very disorganized. Maybe they forget their work, maybe they don't do it on time, maybe they leave their pens and pencils at home. But actually they're not just disorganized, they are still working on developing their planning and organization skills. Often we call children forgetful. Often we can explain something in the lesson and it seems like they weren't listening or they forgot it really easily. And that's often because they haven't developed their working memory skills yet. We can call children impulsive and see that as kind of a negative thing. but actually often it's because they haven't developed their inhibitory control or response inhibition skills yet. Often we judge children as unmotivated, but often they haven't developed their goal-directed persistence skills yet. Some children get called rigid because they can't think in different ways or change the way that they think. But they can develop the skills to do that. That's called cognitive flexibility, and we can support them to develop those skills. Also, often children are told they don't listen, but often they're not interested in the thing that we're talking about, and they haven't learned to sustain their attention on things that they're not interested on yet. And that is a skill in itself too. So I want you to, when you find yourself making judgments about young people, just think about what executive function skill might they need to develop. So in summary for this module, executive functions are brain processes in the prefrontal cortex of our brain. They help us to get things done. Everybody has executive function skills, strengths, and challenges that they can work on developing. There are 11 executive function skills, and executive function skills can be taught just like other skills. So those teachers of you out there will be thinking, okay, these are skills. We can get a curriculum together and we can teach these skills. We can absolutely do that, but we need to understand that executive function skills aren't always accessible to students because their prefrontal cortex isn't always easy for them to use. So again, back to the UK government documentation on this, and I just want to pull out here that the government has recognised that executive functions are capacities that develop throughout childhood and adolescence, and they're shaped by experience, so we can develop them, the environment that a child is in, how safe they feel, and the relationships that they have with their peers, so other children, and with the adults around them as well. So it's more complex than something that a child always has access to. So executive function skills are linked to all types of learning. So sitting still in class and contributing, reflecting on our learning, writing longer pieces of text, doing homework, doing revision, sitting exams. But also we know from the literature that executive function is very important for literacy, for reading and writing, and for numeracy, for mathematics as well. So executive functions are essential for doing well at school. And often we see these kind of behaviours on the surface, and they can be very distressing for teachers when a child has emotional outbursts, when they forget things, when they shout out in class, when they don't complete their homework, when they're disruptive for other children. And we see these behaviours all the time in the classroom, and they're very distressing for teachers. But we have to remember that a child that is showing these types of behaviours, underneath that, they have these executive function challenges, and they feel a lot of shame and guilt about their executive function challenges. And what we know causes these differences in executive function is genetics. So we know that it runs in families, but also trauma, psychological trauma. If something horrendous has happened, if something very bad has happened to somebody, then that will impact their ability to use their executive function. So I just want us to remind ourselves, using the Mentimeter, what is the brain doing in our heads? What is it there for? Is it there for problem solving, procreation, socializing, survival, thinking, movement, or something else? Why is our brain there? What does it do for us? Thank you for the first person. You're absolutely right. It's not a trick question. That's absolutely right. It's all about survival. Survival. That's why our brain is in our heads. It's not about learning mathematics. It's not about learning to write essays. It's about surviving from day to day. That's the primary function of our brains. And we need to solve problems in order to do that. And we need to think, but we need to survive predominantly. So we at Connections in Mind have distilled down 2 areas of the brain that we think are really important that teachers understand. The brain is very complex, and it's the literature, the scientific literature around neuroscience is very dense and difficult to understand. However, we know from the literature that these 2 areas are very, very important. So we have prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is the executive functions where they're found. And it's like the air traffic control center in our brain. It controls our thinking and our feeling. And when we use our prefrontal cortex, we think before we act. We also have another part of our brain called the amygdala. This is like our threat detector. It's constantly scanning information from outside and seeing if there's any type of threat in our environment, because it's got to help us to survive. It's got to keep us safe. So if our amygdala senses any type of threat, whether real or imagined, then we act before we think. Okay? So we are unaware of what we're doing and we do it. It's an instinctual response. So I'm going to show you now this hand model of the brain because it's a really good one to use with our students. So if you'd like to put your hand up like this for me, please, I'll show you how it works. So you put your hand up and then you fold your thumb across the palm of your hand like this. And then you have this knobbly bit of your thumb that sticks out like that. This is the amygdala here. Then we have our cortex and our prefrontal cortex here. So then we have our whole brain state here. Now, when our amygdala senses any type of threat, whether real or perceived, our prefrontal cortex flips off. It becomes disconnected from the rest of our brain. And it's very difficult for us to access the prefrontal cortex and to do the executive functioning because the brain is prioritizing our survival. Now, it takes seconds, milliseconds for this to happen because it needs to happen quickly to keep us safe. But when the amygdala senses there's safety, it takes a while for that prefrontal cortex to come back online, normally around 20 minutes for it to come back online. So if a child has an emotional outburst, they flip their lid, they can't access their rational part of their brain, their prefrontal cortex, and it can take about 20 minutes once they're feeling safe for that prefrontal cortex to come back online. So it's really important for teachers to understand that because often we expect children to be able to think rationally straight after something that's happened where they've been in that instinctive response. So it's a great tool to use with students. So here are some of the ways that children can respond, and adults for that matter, if they sense a threat. And remember, these are instinctive responses. This is not that the child is making a choice to do these things. The brain has learned that these things keep the body safe. So one of the ways is fight. That can be physical fighting, but often it's more verbal these days because physical fighting is not socially acceptable. But we can get defensive and we can argue, and that is that fight response. Then we also have the flight response. That's where we avoid the thing that's threatful. So we run away from it. And that can be asking to leave the classroom to go to the toilet, not turning up to school. Many of these things are flight response. Then we have a freeze response, and that is when we stop and we cannot do anything because it all just feels too threatening. That is that freeze response. Then at the end there, we have the flop response. So we have this flop response with young children when they fall to the floor in emotion. So if they really wanted to have the certain color of cup, maybe they wanted the red cup at break time, but actually they were given the blue one and the emotion is too much and they fall to the floor. That's the flop response. But with adolescents, I'm just going to show you this one by going back on the camera. With adolescents, it tends to be more like they're sitting in the lesson and either they put their heads on the table and they kind of flop in that way, or they kind of flop back in their chairs and their body just goes all floppy. And that is that they've checked out, their body has checked out of the learning because it's feeling too much, either on their attention or on their ability to motivate themselves for the learning. And then we have the fawn response. Now, this is a very interesting one because if we shout at a child, often they will fall into line and they will do what we ask them to do. But that is not the brain making or the child making a choice to do that. It's an instinctive response where the brain has learned that when adults shout, children must fall into line to keep safe. Now, it helps us to feel like we are in control, but actually we're not helping that child to self-regulate in that moment. We are forcing them to dysregulate into a fawn state. And that's not what we want to be aiming for. We want to be aiming for self-regulation. Okay. It's also really important to note that the way that we show up with our emotions as adults impacts children's emotions and their ability to keep that lid on so that they can do the learning. So when we have a regulated adult, so a calm adult and a calm child, we have a calm child. If we have a regulated adult and a dysregulated child, so they flip their lid, as long as we stay calm and keep our lid on, then they will eventually return to calm because they fall into sync with us because of their mirror neurons. If we're both dysregulated, then everyone stays dysregulated, and that's not a good place to be. But as teachers, what we really need to notice is that when we're having a bad day and things are feeling hard for us, that's going to impact the child, and they're going to change from being ready to learn into not being ready to learn. Not all of the children will do that at the same rate. The most sensitive children will pick up on it very, very quickly. So in order to keep calm within our classrooms, it's very important that we work on our own self-regulation and our own well-being to make sure that we're available for the children in our care. We also know from research coming out of Harvard and Yale in America that trauma impacts executive function. So we know that if a child has experienced psychological trauma, excessive stress in their early years, that will impact their ability to use that prefrontal cortex. And also it impacts us as adults as well. We also know that our hormones impact executive function. So estrogen levels impact executive function, as do testosterone levels. And we have to remember that all genders have both hormones in differing amounts. But if we menstruate, then we have fluctuations in our estrogen levels, which means at certain times of the month, that can impact our executive functioning too. And as we approach the menopause as well. So it's very important to know that. So at Connections in Mind, we've done a review of the literature, of the research, and we have discovered, or we have collated the information that all of these things impact executive function. So we have safety, Feeling safe is really important, because if the brain feels safe, the amygdala doesn't sense any threats, the prefrontal cortex can be online. Exercise is really important. Connection, that feeling of love and belonging, is so important. Fun, that's why play is the learning of children. That's how they learn. And often I think we stop them from playing too much, and actually we should let them play more, because that's how they learn best, because the prefrontal cortex is engaged. They're in that flow state, and it helps them to learn and grow. Joy, so when we're enjoying our learning and we are having a wonderful time in our learning, then we learn better. Calm, so this is why mindful practices, yoga, all sorts of different cultural mindful practices can really help get that prefrontal cortex online and ready for learning. Then we have sleep. Sleep is essential for children, we know that, and for learning, but it's really important for executive functioning, as is food, and making sure that the food that we have is slow release, so not too much sugar in first thing in the morning. Instead, having porridges and other things early in the morning that release energy throughout the day, so that we can have access to more energy from the bloodstream as we go throughout the day, to keep the brain functioning optimally. So, executive function skills develop on averages, remembering that there is no such thing as an average child, so all children will develop differently. But on average, we can tend to see working memory, cognitive flexibility, and response inhibition when they are like 3 to 5 years old. When they are starting school, emotional control, sustained attention, and flexibility start to develop. When they are at high school, task initiation, planning and prioritization, and organization. And when they've left school and they've been to university maybe, and they're working, then we have the time management, goal-directed persistence, and metacognition. So they take a long time to develop these executive function skills, and they don't fully develop until the late 20s. It's also really important for educators, teachers to understand that these skills are difficult to develop. As teachers, normally we are good at these things because we have to be to keep employment, to stay in our jobs. But that doesn't mean it's easy for everybody, and we must remember that. When we're developing these skills, we need to actually physically change the brain. So the first time we ask a child to do the skill, then we have just one synapse. It's very, very fragile. Then the more times they do it, the more synapses that form, the connections between the neurons. And then over time, when that neural pathway is used many times, a fatty layer grows around the axon of the neuron. It insulates that electrical impulse as it passes along and allows it to speed up. And we know from the research that on average, it takes 60 times of doing something before it becomes automatic. And you need to do that over many days. You can't just do it 60 times on the same day. It has to be spaced out. But on average, it takes about 60 daily iterations of something before it becomes embedded in the brain. So we need to build that into our planning as teachers so that we can support young people. So when we're teaching executive function, the most essential part of this is to make sure that the child feels safe. Because if they don't feel safe, if their amygdala senses any type of threat, they're going to have their prefrontal cortex is going to be difficult for them to access, and they're not going to be able to access it. So creating learning environments where they feel safe and they're not judged is really important. The second part is about recognizing poor behavior as lagging executive function skills. Okay? So we need to catch ourselves. We need to use our metacognition every time we make a judgment about a student. Oh, they're just lazy. They don't care. They're disorganized. We need to catch ourselves saying those things and remember, okay, actually, which executive function skill have they not developed yet? And how can I, as the educator, support them to develop that skill further? It changes the environment. It helps to create that psychological safety, but also allows us to build those skills in those young people so that they can do the correct behavior that we want to see in school. The best schools are putting in together now executive function skills development programs where every child has goals that they are working towards in terms of their executive function. Just the same as they have goals that they're working towards in terms of their mathematics, in terms of their reading, in terms of their writing. Executive function just needs to be another area that we are looking at the skills development, and we are tracking that throughout their development. We need to work with all the students because all students are developing executive function skills. Okay, so it's not just those that are really struggling, but every single student in our schools can work on developing their executive function skills. And in our experience in England, all the teachers can too, because we have yet to find a human who has all of the executive function skills in abundance. We can all work on developing our skills. So in summary for this module, executive function development is impacted by genetics and trauma. When we are dysregulated, our executive functions are impaired. We can't access them as easily. Our brain prioritizes our survival, so our well-being impacts our executive function. When we look after ourselves, when we encourage children to look after themselves, that helps them to get more work done. It's not a zero-sum game, okay? When we invest that time in well-being, that plays out in our executive functioning. And it's possible and effortful to strengthen our executive function skills, okay? So it's possible to do that, but it takes a lot of effort, just like learning anything new. It's not easy. So I want to move on to some case studies and strategies now so that you can understand a bit more about how this can be applied in a school. So this is Kit. So Kit is charming and he has a very strong verbal ability. He's very good when he speaks. But he's always late. That's his time management. He's often disheveled, so he's disorganized, his shirt isn't tucked in, his hair isn't brushed. His homework is incomplete because he struggles with task initiation and planning and prioritization. And at his primary school, he's given the benefit of the doubt. The teachers love him, so they're like, never mind, it's okay, it's fine. But when he goes to high school, he doesn't have those relationships. And so he gets punished. He gets these negatives and detentions. And it really impacts his mental health. He's like, am I the nice guy or am I the naughty boy? And often these boys we find, they will then start identifying as a naughty boy. And then they will take on that identity and they will fall out of school and they will fall in with gangs and so on and so forth. So it's really important, this work, for preventing that happening. So the strategy that we endorse is that homework skills sessions are given for all pupils. So all of the students are given lessons in how to do homework, how to start a task, how to manage your time, how to plan your time, how to prioritize which piece of work to do first. And they all have goals that they're working on: time management, task initiation, and planning and prioritization, according to where their skills are currently, and always asking them to push more, to do more, as the same as we would do in mathematics or in reading and writing. Then we have Emily. So Emily often makes out of place comments. So she'll be speaking in a group and then she'll say something off topic, something that doesn't make sense to the rest of the group. And that's to do with her metacognition and her response inhibition. She struggles to make friends. That's her cognitive flexibility and her goal-directed persistence. So in order to kind of compromise and be friends with someone else, you have to compromise. You have to be able to do things in the ways that other people want to do. So you need your cognitive flexibility, but you also need to keep going when it feels really hard. And that's your goal-directed persistence. She sits alone at playtimes and she's teased. The other pupils pick on her. Parents struggle to get her into school. So she struggles to attend school. So the strategy here is workshops on celebrating diversity and how to have friendships with people who are not like us, and inclusive play given to all pupils. So it's understood that in this school, it's not okay to isolate anyone. It's not okay to judge anyone. Everyone needs to be included. That's just what we do in this school. And then staff, the teachers and other staff, need to model inclusive conversations, helping her to feel that she is loved and there's a sense of belonging here, because yes, she speaks and goes off on tangents, but actually what she has to say is often interesting, and we can also help her to bring her back to the conversation. And buddying up with a pupil mentor. So making sure that we find someone with a similar neurotype, so someone who also struggles with these things, who can talk to her about how hard it is sometimes when people don't understand you, and she can feel less alone. That's really important. This is Leon. So Leon struggles to engage with his work. So that's his sustained attention and his response inhibition. And he struggles to finish longer pieces of work. So that's his goal-directed persistence. School has a positive reinforcement policy. So they give lots of praise, and they don't focus on the things that the children aren't doing well, just on the good things. But he starts school trying really hard because he wants to impress his teachers, and he never gets recognized for the effort that he's putting in. So what happens is that the teacher sees all the students and they don't see the amount of effort that Leon is putting in to sit still on the carpet or to contribute without shouting out. And so he doesn't get recognized for the effort, and he gives up because it's too much effort to do that. And his nervous system, his body, learns that actually, if he acts out, if he does the things that are naughty, then he will get connection from the teacher. He will get their attention. He will get that connection that he needs. And so his body learns that if he's naughty, if he does bad behavior, then he will get adult connection, because he isn't able to get it through that positive reinforcement route. So the neuro-inclusive strategy here would be to praise the effort and the progress and give feedback on that, not on the outcome, not on the good sitting, but that I can see that you're trying really hard to sit still. And then also evaluating whether sitting still is that important for 5-year-olds. Then having a named adult to welcome and debrief at the end of the day. So one person that he can make that connection with, a healthy connection, without having to act out and to be naughty. Then this is Ralia. I think we've got someone's microphone on there. If you wouldn't mind switching off, that would be great. Thank you. Then we've got Ralia. So Ralia is chatting. She's talking in class after the others are settled to their work. That's to do with her task initiation, her cognitive flexibility, because she's got to change from the discussion they were having down into the new task. And then her metacognition, because everyone else has done it, but she hasn't noticed that she's not done it. So the teacher cautions Ralia, everyone else is getting down to their work. Please concentrate. And she feels judged, so she flips her lid and she argues with the teacher, and then she's sent out. But actually there was a point there where the teacher could have come down to desk level and had a quiet word with Ralia. Oh, I can see you're struggling getting started. Do you need some support to start this task? And that is a totally different way of handling the same behavior that shows her that she's understood and that this is a skill that she needs to develop, and also supports her to start the task. And finally, we have Luke. So Luke has an ADHD diagnosis, and he has lots of minor misdemeanors. So we've got, he's in trouble for chewing gum and for swearing and for being late and for not handing in his homework. Nothing major, but just all these small little things. And then at his school, they have negative points, then detention, then suspension. And actually, Luke was asked to leave the school. He never did anything very bad, but all of these things just accumulated. And because he wasn't doing anything differently, the school felt that they couldn't meet his needs. So he was asked to leave the school. So instead, what the school could have done was give workshops on this response inhibition to all the students. And then all the students choose developmentally appropriate response inhibition goals to work towards, so that they're all working on developing those skills, not just Luke. That would have helped teachers to understand better his skill level, so that they could be fairer about what they expected of him, but also it could help him to recognize that he's being supported in developing those skills, not just judged and punished. So, as we move to the end of the slides now, I just wanted to show you some books, some further reading. So we have the Smart But Scattered books here, and also my book, which is due out on the 13th of August as well. So I recommend all of those. I'd like to hear from you, and you can type this in the chat if you like, or you can pop it into Mentimeter. What is the one thing that you have learned from the training so far today that you will remember tomorrow, next week, in 2027? What is your one thing that you have learned? So you can either type it into the chat or you can pop it in the Mentimeter. I'd love to see what you are going to remember. And the reason I do this is because it helps our colleagues to remember different things, because everyone will remember something different from this presentation. So what will you remember? How the brain controls our actions. Yes, thank you. And getting things done. Our executive function. What else have we got?
जी, अगर कोई भी बताना चाहता है कि उन्होंने क्या लर्न किया आज के दिन से, या तो वो मैसेज में टाइप कर सकते हैं या मीटिंग में जाके जस्ट टाइप समथिंग जो भी आपने सीखा है या नहीं भी सीखा वो. So I just ask them to type anything you learned or you didn't learn. You can write down the question.
Lovely. And Farida said in the chat that revise the lesson on how we can deal with the different behaviours. Yes, absolutely. Remembering that they are, when we have challenging behaviour, always is an executive function skill in development that we can have a different way of looking at that as well. Fantastic. Okay. We're going to get on to the Q&A in a minute. I'm sure more will come out from that. But just to remind you that we are here to help. We are a charitable organisation, a non-profit, and we exist to help the people in our community. Our approach is about connecting with young people and helping them to know themselves better, collaborating with them rather than telling them what to do, so that they can be independent and resilient, and then supporting them to develop new skills over the longer term. So that's our approach. So we have these character cards that we use. So these are for younger children, and each of the executive functions has an animal character. So for planning and prioritization, it's a squirrel who stores nuts in the winter, and she organizes her nuts very nicely, prioritizing the ones that have the most nutrition for when the winter months are the coldest. And then we have, so she has a story behind her, and then we have all the things that we can do to help us with planning and prioritization. Super. And these are all of the different characters that we have. So we have the owl, which is for metacognition. We have the dog for response inhibition. We have the ants that always seem to be busy for getting started. And for time management, we have TikTok Timmy. So we've got these characters for the primary schools. And then also we offer specialist training as well. So if you found that this was helpful, we can offer further training in these approaches. So we offer the neuro-inclusive classroom practice, which is for staff and teachers to create learning environments that reduce the threat and support executive function skills development and help us to meet those diverse learning needs. We also have the executive function coach training, which is approved by the International Executive Function Coaching Certification. And so it is internationally recognized as well. So for the neuro-inclusive classroom practice, it's based on the book that I have coming out this summer. And it's all about having this neuro-inclusive mindset and reducing down the judgment that we make of children. Then we're helping them to learn when they're becoming dysregulated, what it feels like in their body, so that then they can settle themselves and then they can name the executive function skill that they need support with. And then we can strategize with them to come up with good strategies that work for their brains. And then we can reinforce those strategies until they become habits. So you can see the 6 professional standards there. And then IEFCC is this independent non-profit professional certification body setting shared standards for executive function coaching globally, protecting quality, ethics and public trust, and recognizing a demonstrated competence over 28 professional standards. So it's a standalone profession. So lots of teachers do the training, but it's also open to psychologists, managers, anyone who's working in human development. And there's a list here of the 28 standards. And each pathway has 4 levels of certification. So level 1 is knowledge, level 2 is application, level 3 is mentoring, and level 4 is training others. So we can support you to develop capacity within your school or within your region to support others in their development. So this is my almost my last slide, but there's a little bit of feedback here. There's a space for you to leave an email address if you're interested, and we can then send you more information about the courses and the fees and all of that kind of stuff. So please take a moment to complete the feedback form. And in the meantime, we can start thinking about any questions that we might have as well for me in the Q&A, because we're going to have just over half an hour for Q&A.
Yes, Victoria, if I could get like 5 minutes, because I was learning a lot from the presentation, and I want to highlight some of the features that School Mentor mobile apps offer to strengthen the implementation of what we learned today. So, is it possible for you to please move to the case study slide? I just want to show the audience that how they can fix these things, how they can get help fixing these using the. So, just go before Emily, please. There was some guy. Yeah, for example, in the case of kid, you see the strategy to manage this kind of behavior is there should be homework skill sessions for all pupils. And in School Mentor mobile app, we have got a dedicated feature for homeworks, which not only allows teachers to assign homework randomly, but it has the options to generate video messages, which can be sent as a part of homeworks, which we have got the options to add PDFs. We have the options to attach the text files as well. And the beauty of this homework feature that is offered by School Mentor mobile app is that once a homework is issued, it goes straight to the parent's mobile app via push notification as well. And they can check instantly what is the homework being assigned today by the teacher. And of course, principal can also have a look. And most importantly, after like passing down 1 or 2 terms, parents often forget and they start looking at the notebooks that where is that homework being assigned. So by using the School Mentor mobile app, you can simply go to the desired page, select it, and that homework will pop up. So everything can be tracked in this case using the School Mentor mobile app. Can you please go to next slide? I want to discuss about Emily as well. So for Emily, there are workshops that required on celebrating diversity. This session is kind of meets this purpose as well, because teachers over here, they can learn about how to manage neurodivergent pupils as well. So we are holding these sessions, create greater awareness among the teaching audience that they should come and join these sessions, that they are almost free of cost to all the participants. Can you please go to another slide? There is one more thing I want to mention. Yes, for Leon, there is a progress-based feedback required. So for every homework, there is an option for parent to add the feedback, and even there is an option for the teacher to add the feedback to the homework as well, or other features as well that they can add the feedback. And in some cases, parents, they don't feel absolutely confident to discuss things in public. So one-to-one communication between teachers and parents, between principals and parents is possible. So they can work discreetly on that to improve their child's learning outcomes by using School Mentor mobile app. So just one more, please. There was one more. Yes, over here as well. So there was a slide that I perhaps missed that talked about celebrating successes of students. So that can be done via notice board feature in School Mentor mobile app. So via this feature, principals, they can send a one-liner message or a attachment, and it goes to all the people associated with the school. So if you want to find out the success of a student, you can easily mention by just typing a single text, and it will be sorted to everyone, and that will be a great deal of encouragement for that student. And there are dozens and dozens of other features as well that can be used. So yes, Victoria, now we have time for FAQs. So if I can just start asking the question, I got like just one question, if you allow me. So can I ask now? So that there were 2 parts of the brain you were referring to these. There was the rational part, which flips very quickly and takes a long time to come back. And there was a non-rational part, which is kind of impulsive behavior, and one starts acting without thinking. So first, please, just the first part of the question is, does this response time varies person to person, or is it same for everyone? This is the first part. The second is it possible for us to train these 2 things so that we can increase the duration of this impulsive part and decrease the this coming back of this rational? So can you please just tell us?
Absolutely, yes, of course. So depending on people's experiences in the past, will be how quickly they will move to dysregulation. And different things will trigger these responses in different people depending on what they've experienced in the past as well. So for a child who's experienced trauma, it can just sometimes be the smell of something that was the person that caused the trauma that can trigger the response. And so something as simple as that can cause the response there. So it can be impossible for a teacher to predict all of the things that might be triggering for a child. What we can do in the moment is learn from the reaction and try and change it for next time. So yes, it's different for everybody, and different causes of the flipping the lid for everybody, and different things that help us to bring the lid back on. So for me personally, when I have a moment where I become overwhelmed by my emotions, the thing that works for me is a long, slow out breath. I just have to go, and it helps to blow the emotions out, and it helps the prefrontal cortex to come back online. So much so now that when I do that in front of my children, I go, they're like, "Mummy, are you okay? Is everything okay?" Because they know, they've seen me do it, and I'm very happy to do it in front of them because I'm modeling what good self-regulation looks like. And as teachers, we can do that too. Also for me, taking a sip of a drink is very regulating. And if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, you would never stop to have a drink if you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, right? So it's a very ancient signal to our brain that we're safe when we're feeling safe enough to take a drink, because we're looking around, there's nothing going to attack us. We're not on enough protective mode. So things like that, different people have different things. And so a great piece of work that all schools can do is around helping children to work out what is the thing that works for them. Because if they can learn that very young, and we can do that from, 3, 4, 5 years old, they can stay with them all through their whole life. And they can use that technique. So that's a really important thing that we can do. And then I think the second part of the question was around, can we speed this up? Absolutely, yes, we can. So if you think about toddlers, about 2 years old, they go like this all the time, constantly. Their emotions are too much for them. And as they naturally progress, then they are less likely to do this all the time. So the more experiences that they have with an emotionally available adult showing them how to calm down in the moment, the more likely they are to develop that ability. And so what happens is, over time, is there's something called the fronto-amygdala connection. So it's the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex strengthens, because we are doing more of this, and we can see that on brain scans. So the best way to do that is through co-regulation. So the adult is modeling how to regulate in the moment. And if you try this with children, it's, instead of getting angry with them because they're being irrational, just try sitting close to them and breathing slowly, making sure that your breathing is staying very slow and very quiet. And just keep breathing slowly, and eventually they will calm. It doesn't happen immediately, but it happens a lot quicker than if you got angry with them and they ran off and, all sorts of things happen. So just try that approach, and it can have a big effect. But not the same things work for each child. Again, there may have been some awful situation where someone had sat close to a child, breathing quietly and deeply, that then led to something awful happening. So if you did that with a child, that might trigger a response. So you need to be very aware of that individual child when we're doing these things, and speak to them about what's working for them.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Just one more thing. There was a concept you were talking about, that if something is repeated for 60 times, gets embedded into our brain. So how many times we have to do it to reverse this effect if someone starts there? So is there any number for that as well?
So what's interesting in that piece of research is that if we are motivated, so if we really want to do something, it can be even shorter than 60. So if it's something we're really engaged with and really want to do, it's much, much quicker, because the dopamine helps with that with that synapse formation. But if we are bored and not interested, and this is not something we want to do, it can take like 260 times of doing it. Okay, so the most important thing for teachers to take away from that is let's make the learning fun. Let's make it enjoyable. The more the child is enjoying it and are motivated for the learning, the more easy it's going to become embedded in the brain.
Okay, yes, thank you. So anyone else, अगर कोई और भी क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहता है, प्लीज आप अगर रिलक्टेंट हैं इंग्लिश बोलने में मुझे बताएं, मैं ट्रांसलेट कर देता हूँ. लेकिन आई एम श्योर ऑल ऑफ यू कैन स्पीक वेरी गुड इंग्लिश. So I see house is open for you. There was Ma'am from American Lyceum. If they are still here, if she wants to ask a question, they're more than welcome to do so. I can remember from past sessions that we had so many questions, but Pakistanis, they are usually very shy in front of others. So all of us have a kind of certain fear in our mind that, oh, maybe we are asking this question and maybe this is not the right question. But normally we used to have a full house on sessions.
So we've got one here from Ahmed. Oh, yeah, please, Farida, go for it.
Yes. I just want to ask that mostly when the discipline or some behavioral cases are from the ages of like 11 to 14 or 15 years, there are some reasons that we have to contact the parents for certain reasons or behaviors. And there are certain behaviors which cannot be controlled by the teachers. And that is very much annoying. And that also disturb the overall environment of the class. And ultimately, as you said, the teachers, when get annoyed or irritated, they shout in the class, and that shouting also results in irritation. And afterwards, sometimes the children may enjoy that irritation of the teacher, and they will do this again. But sometimes it happens that we need that the parents have to be there, and some counseling sessions should be adopted for them. What do you say about the teenagers? Because nowadays it has become very much essential that the children should have some counseling session, and that counseling session has to be adopted in the schools. But every school doesn't have such facility. What should do the teachers for that thing?
Okay. So yes, this period you're talking about, this 11 to 14, in fact, it kind of runs up to kind of 16, sometimes even as late as 18, is a period where a child, an adolescent has a very, very strong need for status and respect. And so if they feel that they're not getting status and respect from their learning from school, they will find other ways to get that status and respect. And that can be around undermining the teacher and showing these behaviors that are very difficult to control, because that gives them status and respect for the other children. So there's a really good book called 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People. And whenever I see a student that is acting like that, I feel there's two things that they're lacking. One is connection, that they're not feeling connected with their teacher, they're not feeling connected with their peers. But the most important one is autonomy. They're not feeling in control of their learning. So I would, instead of having counseling sessions, I would have the teacher and the child sit down together and just say, look, this behavior is disturbing the class. I think you're trying to communicate something to me about something that's going on for you. Can you talk to me more about what's going on for you and what you're feeling like your needs aren't being met in the lesson? And if you have that kind of adult conversation with the child, it's amazing how many of these disruptive children will actually come out with what's really going on for them and feel really seen and understood. But when we keep trying to shut down the behavior, they're getting, like you said, they kind of smile and they're like, oh, this is great, and it doesn't work. But when we tell them that they're seen and we understand that they're hurting, that they're communicating that they're hurting in some way, then we can work together with them to to remove that. So with some students, it's that they want more autonomy. So giving them a role of responsibility within the class can give them that response, that status and respect. Are they the person who has the responsibility for something important? And then they get that status and respect. There's all sorts of different ways we can do it, but shutting down the behavior, invoking that fawn response is never going to get them to the stage where they are self-regulated and engaging in the learning. It just keeps pushing it further down. Yeah.
One more thing, if you allow. Thank you very much, Victoria. But one more thing, because nowadays it has become a problem for the parents as well as the teachers, that the children's screen time has been increased so much. And that increased screen time has affected not only the homework which we assigned to the students, and that has also affected the learning capacity of the students. We don't know, because nowadays the social media, the AI oriented teaching and learning, how we can stop the children from doing saving the screen time or reducing the screen time.
Okay, so again, this is another thing of whenever I hear how do we get children to, I'm like, okay, we're trying to control students, right? And they don't want to be controlled. They're adolescents, their brains are programmed for status and respect at that level. So they want to be brought into a collaboration whereby it's very clear to everyone what the goals are. So I would start off by doing having an expert within the community. You don't have to pay them lots of money, but just an expert within the community to come in and show the students the research about the impact of screen time on their cognitive development. Okay, in black and white. This is how screen time is impacting your cognitive development. Then I would open it up to them and I would say, right, students, now you have this information. We know that you want to lead a good life and to do your best. What from this information, what goals do you want to work on as a group around your screen time to limit that? And getting it onto them to come up with goals that they want to work on, how they're going to hold each other accountable to that, would completely shift the dialogue from how do we get children to do things and then all of a sudden it becomes their thing that they're taking ownership of and they want to do. And then it's a completely different way of doing things. And then what happens is that generation of children within the community are then bringing about change within the community where it's not socially acceptable to be constantly on your phone because they're aware of these things and they've got these social contracts within their community. So always a coaching approach. It's evidence-based to work much better with teens than trying to control them, because we just can't control them. If we look at the evidence, they don't want to be controlled. They want everything but being controlled.
Yes, you are right. Thank you so much, Victoria. Actually, I am Vice Principal in the Standard Grammar School, and the information you have provided will really help me out to further execute the things and to guide my teachers. Thank you very much.
Farida, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. Great. I just want to come back to Ahmed's Mubisha Ahmed, who asked, how can we get attention from students at the beginning of class so the lecture goes good? This is such a great question. And I think I, as part of my work, go into a lot of schools and I observe lessons. And also in my book, we talk about exactly this. And what the evidence shows is that transitions are quite dysregulating for students, for all adults. And if you think about when you're having a training session and you come into that training session, if you're thinking about all the things that you've got to do in your day and you're busy and your brain's busy, you're not going to learn well. So the best way to start off to get everyone in the zone for learning is to practice a mindfulness practice at the beginning of a lesson. Now, that can be one universal practice that you do for all the students, or when they get more experienced at it, they can work out the thing that works for them and they can be busy getting on with that at the beginning of the lesson. But one of the things that we found to be universally helpful is a mindful body scan, where you start at the top of your head and you work through your body, sensing any type of tension, and then release that tension all the way down to the feet. And that's guided by the teacher. And when you've done it more and more times, actually, you can have it guided by perhaps the child that was going to be, disruptive in the lesson, they can guide that practice, because that gives them status and respect within the group as well, because they're being trusted to do something for the rest of the group. So you can develop that, but taking those 2 minutes at the beginning of a lesson to regulate everyone and to settle them makes such a huge difference. Now, you may not want to do that kind of settling activity if they've come in after lunch and they're all feeling tired and sleepy. You may want to do something where you get their energy up. So you might want to do some star jumps, or there's various different kind of mindful exercises you can do which are more up-regulating to bring the energy up. But helping students to understand that they're in control of how their attention is, and they can self-regulate, can be modelled in every single lesson in the school day. I hope that helps.
Hi, can I raise a question?
Yes, Bushra, yes. Please.
Yeah. See what happens when we start the class in the beginning of the session. We start getting to understand individual students. It might take some time, but eventually we get to know what is the background or the structure at house of individual student. And then it helps the teacher to handle a student individually or with the individual needs. But the problem arises, let's say, if X students is a little pampered one at home and he or she needs little more kinder words than others. So if I am treating that X student with more kinder words than the others, the other students start taking the teacher for granted. Now, how to keep this balance up, keeping the individual needs in mind at the same time?
That is such a great question. Thank you, Bushra. I love that. It is tricky, isn't it? It's tricky when we are the one adult with 30 plus students. Actually, it's a very unnatural thing to do. And if you think back in human traditions, we never would have been in those kind of large groups. And so it is very difficult to do that. It's not impossible, though. And I think it's really important that we are explicit with students about how everyone is different. So if we train students to understand that everyone's brains are different, everyone needs different things, then we can then be explicit about the fact that we are treating everybody differently because that's what they need, and we can take them on that journey. Also, what I have in my book, we talk about a technique called mental contrasting, which is whereby in a lesson, when you have set a learning task and it's not going the way that you'd planned it to go, maybe there's a lot of people who kind of flop response, or people are chatting or whatever it is, and the learning isn't happening the way you wanted it to go. You can stop the class. You can say, okay, this isn't going how I planned. Talk to me about what's feeling hard about this now. And if they've got an executive function literacy within that school, then they can say, I'm struggling with my task initiation, or I'm struggling with my cognitive flexibility, or I'm struggling with my working memory, or all these kind of things. And you can put those down on the whiteboard. And then you can start brainstorming, okay, what are the strategies that we can use to help ourselves, so that we can start moving away from the teacher having to be the person that's constantly doing things differently, to the student having a toolbox of things that can help them to get started on tasks, to follow through on tasks, etc. Because we're modeling all the time that everyone will be getting stuck in different ways on different things, and everyone needs something different to get started, and people can select from that. So that's very much how we do it in the book. So I recommend having read the book. There's also going to be an audio and ebook version as well, so you can have a listen to the book as well when it comes out in August too. Thanks, Bushra.
Well, I'd like to add one more thing. If this could work, this is what I feel can work out. See, after a certain period of time, now I know all of my students, they're at least 80% of their psychology. How do they think? How do they behave in certain situations? Now, if I know if I'm going to give more attention to one of the students who is in need of extra attention, the other students would also be demanding the same thing. So what I have started doing, I sit individually with the other students on and off, and then I discuss the class with them so that they could be helpful to each other instead of being competitors to each other all the time.
That's great. That's great. That's exactly on the same wavelength of what I was just talking about too. When we make these things explicit and we give these roles to students and help them to understand that they can be helpful in each other's learnings as well, it takes us away from this competitive, each individual student against each other, to learning is something we do as a group, because it is something we do as a group. So that's a wonderful way of doing it, Bushra. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yes, the David Yeager, Science of Motivating Young People. It's such a fantastic book. I really do recommend it. It's brilliant. I was just looking back on some of these things. San is just saying, I've been a teacher but always felt that I was behind from other teachers and never felt confident. I doubt myself a lot and I find it hard controlling students. Okay, so San, this is really common in lots of teachers. I think, often people who go into teaching really want to help and they want to do well, and they often don't have very high self-confidence. And what's interesting is what students need from us is a high level of self-confidence. So I think it's really important, if you're feeling low in confidence, to get yourself some coaching, some support, and really focus on the things that you're doing well, because I'm sure you're doing lots of things really well. Focus on doing those really well, and then choose 1 or 2 things every month that you want to improve on. And then you can then start growing and developing in those areas that you're struggling with. But without support, often it can be hard. We can feel stuck, and we can feel stuck in our low confidence. But the neuroscience is very clear. If we're motivated for change, we can all change and improve and do things better. So I hope that gives you the confidence to try, because that's the first step. Fantastic. We had a hand up there. Who was that? Does someone want to come in?
Miss Ramya Shah, आपने hand raise किया था, if you want to ask questions. I guess it was someone named Ramya Shah. So you can speak if you want. Or maybe there's whatever after the same. Yeah, I was just wondering, Victoria, how much of the morning training of mental things one takes when they become adults? Or once they become adults, can they modify this training? As you were saying that it's very easy when people are young to train themselves. However, if someone has grown adult and they have very little training, are there any chances for them to get that?
Absolutely. So that we know that the adolescent period is the best time to entrench these kind of behaviors. So we know that it's really important that what starts in adolescence tends to continue into the rest of our lives. So very important that we focus on the adolescent years. But we also know from the neuroscience that anyone until the day that they die can change their brain and the way that they learn and do things. We know that as a biological fact. Because of the way that the brain wires itself and the myelination, the older we are, the harder and more effortful it is to change. And that reflects on, if you think back to when you're younger, I can do that, no problem. But the older we get, the more change feels more challenging and more difficult. But it's not impossible, absolutely. And with the right support, anyone can change. And it's about believing in ourselves and doing things differently, and recognizing it will be hard. Change is never easy, but it's worth it if it gets us to where we want to get to.
So I guess we have around 5 more minutes for more questions. So if someone wants to have their say or want to ask something, they are more than
So we've got something from Farida here saying that 80% of these problems are resolved when a strong lesson has been planned and the teacher knows the students attending the lesson. Yes, it's about those relationships and it's about strong routines. Absolutely, they can be. But also just being explicit about the fact that these things are skills are really, really important. Because then those children that are feeling a lot of shame because they struggle with these things recognize that they can develop these things. It's not just that they are disorganized or they are lazy, that becomes part of their identity. But when we switch it around and we say, you're struggling with your time management skills, you need to develop your task initiation skills. That's a totally different conversation. So I would just add that into you. And then Anika was saying how teachers can manage anger when handling disruptive students. Okay, so anger is an emotional kind of lashing out is very common in students, especially neurodivergent students as well. Often they can be very sensitive. And managing anger is obviously around, first of all, making sure everyone's safe. Okay, so if you can, moving other children from the situation, or taking the child into a space where they can express their anger safely without harming anyone else. That's the most important first thing. And then it's around, again, that co-regulation. So that might be just be sitting quietly and breathing with the student. It might be about both of you holding like some kind of fidget toy or stress, so that they can do that. It might be about punching something together, but all kind of modeling healthy ways to process anger. We're allowing it out of the body and not kind of holding it in is really important. And then once the prefrontal cortex has come back online, then you can sit down with the student maybe an hour, 2 hours later, and say, what happened this morning was really scary for everyone around you. We want to make sure that we don't hurt anyone in the future. So we want to work with you to support you to develop your skills and your anger management skills and your emotional regulation skills. Sounds a bit less judgy, doesn't it? And then working out with them a program of how you're going to do that, and that they are going to learn other ways to express their anger, because it's fine to be angry. We're human. We're not always angry, but we all have the right to be angry at some times. It's just not okay to harm other people when we're angry. And so we've got to separate the emotion and the behavior out. And then we can support them to develop healthy ways to process anger. That mean that they don't have to harm anyone else. Ariba. I have a student with specific learning conditions. I've tried breaking tasks into simple steps and for him and using other psychological techniques also, but it's still difficult to make him retain the information that we study in class. Yes, it's really challenging with different learning profiles. And I think what's really important is to work with the student if they're able to communicate with you on this, and put together some learning goals that would feel that he or she could feel some success in the lesson. So it may be something that's slightly adjacent to what you're learning in the topic, but that they could feel that they're making progress in that area. It doesn't always have to be the specific thing that you're learning with the rest of the class as well, because sometimes that can be out of reach cognitively for that child, and we're setting them up to feel like a failure if we're constantly setting them work to do that's slightly out of reach for them. So we've got to make sure it's in the zone of proximal development, and so working out with the child. And I would always encourage, I think far too often in education we have meetings about children and we make decisions about children and we do things to children, but I have a very core principle in my work that nothing about me without me, that I'm always involved as a student in these conversations. And if the student isn't able to contribute because of their learning disabilities, then parents should be part of that conversation as their representatives. Super. Okay, right, I think we're coming to the end of our time.
Yes, it is just like 2 to 3 minutes. So I guess Rehana Khan has raised her hand if she wants to have a quick question.
Sure.
Maybe it has been popped up. I guess you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Yes, ma'am. Please explain how can we handle the student of different anger issues.
Sorry, can you repeat that for me? You just cut out. Sorry. Can you say that again for me?
I guess she wants to understand how to handle students with different anger issues. Just the same thing that you talked a while ago. If the class has several students and most of them have different anger issues. How teachers can handle this?
Okay, so again, that mental contrasting approach that I talked about earlier, that's written out in detail in my book, is great for this. So it's about when the children are regulated, so not when they're angry, because you're only going to be speaking to the amygdala, and that's not very rational. So you need to wait till they've got their prefrontal cortex online. Then you can have a conversation with them about anger management, about the importance of that, and about what each individual needs in terms of support, so that it's ahead of time. We know what you're going to do to support them if they have a moment of anger, and how they can support each other as well. So it shouldn't always be down to the teacher, and we don't want to give too much responsibility to the students, but we can give them responsibilities as well. So again, what could a peer do to help you, etc. But that conversation must happen when the child is feeling safe and feeling regulated and not feeling judged, because otherwise it will quite quickly turn into another dysregulated situation.
If you want, I can summarize that first for you. In Pakistan, people in almost every school, they have got 7 to 8 classes per day, right from when children are in grade 1. I mean, it is very difficult for them to even carry their bags with like 7 to 8 books, 7 to 8 notebooks, and they have the water bottles and all the stationery. So one teacher is asking, since teachers are not in control of these affairs, that they cannot control the number of books that are being taught. So what possible strategies they can adopt to make students a little bit stress-free and make them understand that it is worthwhile having 8 or 10 lectures, still having worthwhile.
Yeah, it's tough. That is a lot to take on. I think, again, it comes back down to with the writing thing that's been written here. They've only written a couple of lines. Again, I would have that mental contrasting type conversation. So look, we feel like you're more capable to write more than that, because perhaps there's evidence in other lessons that they can. Tell me more about what's feeling hard in this lesson, so that I can understand that better, and then you can start working out in that lesson. Maybe it is that they're tired or hungry, or they find the subject boring, or whatever it is that the information that they give you. Then you can do something with that. But it's not going to be universal for all the different students. I should imagine the 2 or 3 students for each one, it will be a different thing that's causing the issue. Maybe it's because they've noticed that their friend isn't doing the writing, so then they feel like they don't have to do the writing. So when you can ask the student themselves, you'll get much better answers about what needs to be done.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, I'm going to shoot off now, I think.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mrs. Victoria. It was lovely to have you here, and I'm very much sure that everyone who has participated has learned a lot more. I'm quite sure we never heard about executive function before, and it was an eye-opener for us that it can be used to improve teaching and learning. Wish you all the best for your future endeavors as well. And we might bump into each other in future, maybe with some more trainings like this.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just typing my email address here into the chat. So if anyone wants to send me an email with any follow-up questions or to ask about further training, please feel free to get in touch.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much, everyone. See you later. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Shah. Bye.
Well,